an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, brought to you by Ashlyn. In these chapters, it turns out that there is something really significant going on with these obelisks that I still don't really understand. And there are also some secret communities popping up that apparently nobody knew about. One of them is really, really old, and the other one is pretty new. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, guys, there's so much about the lore of this world that is still being revealed that it makes it really tough for me to make any sorts of guesses or predictions about what's going to happen. And that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, I find it pretty fascinating and I like that. But it does sort of change the way that I'm reading. It's more, even though there isn't an actual mystery, there is a little, but that's not this isn't a mystery novel. It does sort of read like that to me because I am just waiting for the author to tell me more information, if that makes sense. So in this section, we find out that we didn't know that the orogenes could harness energy from the obelisks. And apparently that's not necessarily a common thing. And also I did not know that the guardians had powers of their own. And the powers are not naturally occurring powers. They are powers that come from implants and training. And I think that if the question had been directly asked of me, I would have said that the Guardians maybe had something that made them impervious to the powers of orogenes, because I think there is a sense to them when, for example, Demaya gets picked up. Her guardian doesn't seem afraid of her, doesn't seem worried about her hurting him. And I did notice that, this really intense confidence that he seems to have. So I think that logically, I just would have assumed there's a reason for that confidence. There's something that they've got that allows them to feel safe. But I don't think I would ever have put it on the level that it turns out it actually is. It's more than you can't ice me. It's more than I can head off your power to keep it from expanding outward. It's more than any of that. We have this intense scene, and I'll get to the whole description of it, in which he is able to keep both of them from accessing power at all. Not just the flood of power out from them gets cut off. It goes much more to the root than that. It's the base of things. They can't reach into the earth, which makes them both feel like they are kind of half a person because they're so used to constantly doing that. At least being able to feel the earth, if not actually tapping it. That having that ability stripped away from them is really, really disorienting and uncomfortable. But also, there are things that we haven't yet totally, we haven't seen, we've heard tell, and they're able to do things by touch. They have knives that look like regular, glass knives, because apparently that's metal knives. I don't know if those just aren't a thing in this world or if they're not considered to be as good, but most of the knives that we hear talked about are called glass knives. And I believe they all sound like they're made of obsidian. And their knives do something more than just cut. There's something about them that has an ability to affect orogenes as well. So there are a lot of factors here. And I just didn't really think through that, of course, Guardians would have to be able to handle orogenes in this way in order for them to be grouped together at a place like the Fulcrum without people being terrified of them, you know? I like when things like this crop up, that it makes such logical sense that rather than be like, oh, okay, I guess that's the thing, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that explains this. It's really good storytelling to me. If you reveal something new, and rather than, like, it brings up other questions, sure, but rather than making you go, well, wait, how this then? It actually explains other things that you didn't even realize you were wondering about. So I'm going to start, the chapters I covered in this section are 14, 15, and 16. Syenite breaks her toys, You're Among Friends, and Scion in the Hidden Land. So, Syenite gets a telegram that just says, remain at location, await instructions. And this is like, the way that this is revealed to us is almost like in this cavalier conversational sort of manner. Because, well, first of all, I highlighted something that I wanted to mention, and it's not really story related, but there's a sentence that says, she glares at him as she paces. He is completely relaxed, a long-boned positive space against the bed's negative whiteness in the dim evening light. I just want to mention here how important this sort of thing is and how little I think about it from day to day. Those of you who have taken art classes are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. You are taught the difference between positive and negative space in composition. And almost always, the negative space is the black, and the positive space is the white. And when I say the black and the white, I mean in the very basic classes, you're given literal like pieces of white and black construction paper, and are instructed to make shapes and things and pose them against one another. And it's always the blackness that's assumed to be negative space, because black represents nothingness and white is somethingness. And so that is the positive space. But in this sentence, he, Alabaster, who is black, long bone positive space against the bed's negative whiteness. She's reversed that in a way that really makes you ask, like, well, we decided that the blackness is negative space, but why do we just accept because people say that? And it's not like I think that this is so like socially significant necessarily in terms of like the, I don't feel like, for example, that it translates literally to blackness is negative and therefore we're being racist by saying this. I think it's more that like we just take the word of our teachers in calling the blackness negative space, when in fact there's no real reason behind that other than it's the way it's always been done and always been talked about. And if somebody were to have started off calling it positive space and you were taught that way from a child, and then you went to another school and they talked about it in the reverse, you would be so baffled and would, of course, that's not right. What do you mean? And I just really liked that moment because it took me out for a second and made me question, like, that even in things as creative and open-minded as art, there are sort of rules that we take for granted in a lot of ways. And we really don't need to. We can think outside of that, but we don't even have the imagination to question it a lot of the time. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I had that highlighted here. But so, okay, we have this moment between Alabaster and Syenite where they've been told to stay in one place. She thought they were going to finish this job and come home, and that's not what they're being instructed to do. And he's trying to, like, he's sort of trying to calm her down because she is very agitated and I think suspects that she's about to be disciplined and she doesn't really know why. And she says, "Is this some kind of punishment? Was I not supposed to find a giant floating whatever the rust hidden at the bottom of a harbor during a routine coral clearing job? As if anyone could have anticipated that." "Most likely," Alabaster says, "they want you on hand for whenever the geomists arrive, in case there's more potential business for the fulcrum in it." He said this before, and she knows it's probably true. Geomists have already been converging on the city, in fact, and archaeomists and lorists and biomists, and even a few doctors who are concerned about the effect that an obelisk so close will have on Alia's populace. And the charlatans and cranks have come too, of course. Metallurists and astronomists and other junk science practitioners. Anyone with a bit of training or a hobby from every comm in the Quarton and neighboring ones. The only reason Syenite and Alabaster have even gotten a room is that they're the ones who discovered the thing and because they got it in early. Otherwise, every inn and lodging house in the Quarton is full to brimming. So she's just really, like, on edge because she doesn't understand what's going on. And she also, like, later allows herself to think that even though Alabaster has a pretty good reason for his suggestion of what's going on, like, that it sounds logical and like policy in quotes, she still doesn't really believe that that's what's going on. She's like, you know, if they wanted to talk to me about this, I could be interviewed at the fulcrum. And it would make more sense if geomists wanted to talk to me. The fulcrum could keep me, like, in custody and charge the geomists for access to me, which they'd be much more likely to do. Like, that was something that they would capitalize on. And Alabaster, this is the part where it's, like, sort of just dropped into the conversation. Alabaster has warned her not to talk about this part of it. "No one needs to know that you can connect to the obelisks," he said the day after the incident. He was still weak then, barely able to get out of bed after his poisoning. Turns out he'd been too orogenically exhausted to do anything when she raised the obelisk, despite her boasting to Asael about his long-distance skill. "Tell them you just tried to shift the strata and the thing popped up on its own, like a cork under water. Even our own people will believe that. It's just another dead sieve artifact that doesn't make any sense. Nobody will question you about it if you don't give them a reason to. So don't talk about it, not even to me." Which, of course, makes her want to talk about it even more. But the one time she tried after Baster recovered, he glared at her and said nothing until she finally took the hint and went to do something else. So, this is, like I said, is just sort of dropped into the story that she's able to connect with these, because the description of her finding the obelisk underwater it sort of implies that she can't connect with it because she feels like nothingness. And she can't understand what it could possibly be that's blocking things and lifting the coral to such a height that it will become a problem in, like, less than 100 years. So the fact that she can connect with it came as an enormous surprise to me. And the fact that he didn't want her to talk about it, of course, the way that it's written, the first thing that I thought was, okay, so he thinks they're being listened to. Are they bugged? Is that a thing they can do here? It's a really, it's unclear in this universe what kind of technology is available and what isn't, because there's a huge there's a tendency for me to think that all of the technology here is like more around what I would expect from like 1910, like turn of the century sort of thing. But then we've got the nodes, which are these pretty complex machines dialed into actual human body functions in a way that feels very advanced. So when I was like theorizing that maybe they're bugged, I was like, I'm not even sure if that's like something they can do or not, because my instinct was to sort of wave it off. I was like, well, of course that's not it. But I don't have any evidence to really say that they couldn't do that, except for the fact that the technology would have to really be substantial to like stand up against shakes and seasons and whatever. But as it turns out, it is what Alabaster is afraid of is that they can be listened to through the stone of wherever they are. So if the building is built on like a stone slab, if it's connected to other like pieces of, basically, if there is a network in place under where they are speaking that is made of stone, somebody can listen through the vibrations, which sounds ludicrous, but Alabaster is very quick to assure Syenite that he is able to do that. And she asks if like all 10 ringers are able to, and he's like, I don't know, like, but I know that I can, and I would imagine that if I can, there has to be others, and we don't know that we're safe. Again, safe from what is the thing? She still doesn't know or understand, and he doesn't really explain to her what's happening, and I don't understand why he doesn't. And I feel like there's a lot of subtext here that I'm meant to be getting as a reader, and I'm not sure that I'm picking up on all of it. But yeah, so... And there's still, like, even here, it's very obvious to us that Alabaster was purposely poisoned. But we find out later that, she's still questioning whether or not that's even true. And that maybe there was, like, a cook who was incompetent. And Alabaster has to be like, then literally the entire inn would be dead. There would be so many more illnesses, and this has not happened. Of course this is targeted. So through all of this, it's like him knowing that she's in a lot of danger and not wanting to explain why, for reasons that I'm not entirely sure about, except that he doesn't want to explain when they are near where they can be overheard, but you could write it down or something. And then there is the fact that she still seems so unwilling to accept that either of them were targeted at all. If she accepted that, then knowing she was in more danger would probably be easier to accept. But she's just burying her head in the sand when it comes to this. So let's see. The obelisk, which is easily visible at the end of the avenue they're standing on, where the thing hovers perhaps 10 or 15 feet above the harbor water, emits another of the low, barely perceptible pulses that it's been spitting out since Syenite raised it. And that makes her forget about the kids. Something's wrong with that thing, Alabaster says very softly. Syenite looks at him, annoyed and on the brink of saying, "What, now you want to talk about it?" when she notices that he's not looking at it. He's scuffing the ground with one foot, his hands in his pockets. And she realizes that he is trying to affect a posture as if he's like flirting with her or something, so that somebody walking by wouldn't know that they are in a pretty, what's the word? An important conversation, a significant conversation. Also, Syenite realizes that the pulse that is let out by this obelisk is not something that anybody else can feel. Only she and Alabaster are able to tell it's happening. And it's not happening in rhythm. And it's not brief. It's just this like large throbbing sensation through the air that happens intermittently at like random intervals. And I don't know what that means. You know, like later on, when it turns out that this isn't like that the stone person in this gem that she had assumed was dead isn't dead, it made me wonder if this isn't like a prison. Because we don't know how the stone people work. And I wouldn't, you know, there have to be schisms and people who do things that the others don't want. And what do you do when somebody is like flouting societal norms or endangering people? You have to separate them from the people that they are at risk of hurting. So I could see maybe that this is like a prison, and that it was purposely buried underwater to keep this stone person from being able to meet with others or escape from it, or, you know, I don't know. I'm just wildly theorizing here, which means that there is something like that there are some serious stakes to keeping whomever is in there inside it. But we don't really know. Like, all of this is me just guessing. And the word broken keeps being used to refer to it, to the obelisk. And I don't know if broken is what you would want when it comes to like imprisoning somebody dangerous. Is this like a stone person who is somehow disabled? Did something happen to it? Like, I don't know. So anyway, I'm just theorizing about this because he points out that the obelisk is listing to one side, which she hadn't even noticed because it's such a subtle tilt. But once she sees it, she can't unsee it. And that's another thing that I never really thought about, because it's not like, I don't know if it's something that's necessarily detailed specifically when we first hear about the obelisks, but if it is, it didn't stick with me. So the fact that it's listing is really, really significant and kind of shocking enough in and of itself that she just can't believe it until she looks and sees for herself. Sorry, I think there's a bird trying to get inside of my window here. So this is when he says that obelisk is failing. What's that got to do with us? You raised it. It raised itself. I just moved all the crap that was holding it down and maybe woke it up. That her mind insists it was sleeping before is not something she's willing to question too deeply. And that's more control over an obelisk than anyone has ever managed in nearly 3,000 years of imperial history. Baxter shrugs a little. If I were a jumped-up little 5-ring pedant reading a telegram about this, it's what I'd think, and it's how I'd react. By trying to control the person who can control that. His eyes flicked up towards the obelisk. But it's not the jumped-up pedants at the fulcrum we have to worry about. Syan doesn't know what the rust he's on about. It isn't that his words don't ring true. She can completely imagine someone like Feldspar pulling something like this. But why? To reassure the local population by keeping a 10-ringer on hand? The only people who know Baxter's here are a bunch of bureaucrats who are probably too busy dealing with the sudden influx of guests and tourists to care. To be able to do something, should the obelisk suddenly do something? That makes no sense. And who else is she supposed to worry about? Unless, this is when she says something about connecting to the obelisk and that he did something that night. You can do something with those things, can't you? You can control them. Does the fulcrum know that? No, and you don't either. Why are you being so... And this is when he explains to her that he can hear through the stone. You can too, probably. It just isn't clear yet. It's just minute vibrations to you now. Around my 8th or 9th ring is when I started to distinguish patterns amid the vibrations. Details. But you're the only 10-ringer. Most of my children have the potential to wear 10 rings. Syenite flinches, suddenly remembering the dead child in the node station near Mehi. Oh. The Fulcrum controls all the node maintainers. What if they have some way to force those poor damaged children to listen and to spit back what they listen to, like some kind of living telegraph receivers? Is that what he fears? Is the Fulcrum like a spider perching in Eumeni's... I wish that I could get this town's name fucking right. Eumeni's heart and using the web of nodes to listen in on every conversation in the stillness? But she is distracted from these speculations by something that niggles at the back of her mind. Most of my children have the potential to wear 10 rings, he'd said, but there are no other 10 ringers in the Fulcrum. Raga children are sent to the nodes only if they can't control themselves. Aren't they? Oh. No. She decides not to mention this epiphany aloud. Okay. This epiphany is something that I'm a little stuck on because I'm not... I like it, don't get me wrong, when writers don't spell things out completely. Because I feel like it implies they trust their readers. But there are times where I'm like, I wish you would just tell me because I'm not positive I'm right about this. I think what her epiphany is that it's said, she's only been told that they're sent to nodes if they can't control themselves. But that is not necessarily true. And that they are, like, she's realizing that they're being sent specifically because they have this potential and can be exploited. That they have the same kind of, like, high-level potential that he has. I don't know this to be true. I don't, but I feel like there's something here that I'm missing. But anyway, so I wanted to sit on that. So, oh yeah, here it is. So here's when she starts to think about who it is that they have to worry about, because she keeps thinking about the seniors at the Fulcrum. And at first when he says we don't have to worry about them, she doesn't understand. But then she thinks about who the seniors answer to and realizes that the Guardians are the ones that are really in charge. And I find it really interesting that the Guardians are such a factor in, like, say, Demaya's life, because of them being the ones that go out and pick up Ragas and bring them to the Fulcrum. But that for somebody like Syenite, the Guardians don't even occur to her until she makes herself think things through a little bit more. So I had been under the, like, mistaken assumption that Guardians were sort of the ones who ran the place, like the teachers or professors or wardens. And that's, I didn't really, like, look at it that in the descriptions of Demaya in classes and stuff, the teachers, like, a lot of them seem to be also orogenes. So this is like the Guardians are even more removed than I ever expected. And apparently, like, they're out in the field a little bit more because they're working on finding others and bringing them in. So that changes the dynamic of everything a little bit in my head. The Guardians feel a lot less bureaucratic and a lot more dangerous if I look at them that way. So, all right. Not for the first time, Syenite wonders, to whom do the Guardians answer? And later on, she's kind of wondering if it's the Emperor. And I don't feel like I ever heard about this Emperor. Like, I don't feel like I have heard about it. I may have, and it just, like, got shoved to the side. But that brings up a whole bunch of other questions. So there's this guy who is at the beach as they walk down there, and he's sitting there waiting for them. And he has no shirt on and is really, really attractive. And she notices him and like has to like keep her eyes off him because she's really like, she's been having sex regularly with Alabaster, but it's like required forced sex that she's not interested in. And here is a very appealing man. So she's like, you know, oh, what's up, buddy? And then tries to be polite about it. But then she realizes he's staring at them in a way that is not normal. It's not something that she has seen from anybody else in town. They've been nodded at and apologized to in Alia a couple times, which has never happened before ever. She's not used to being treated with that kind of courtesy. And it's probably because of the discovery of the obelisk and them like rising in everyone's estimation. Burgundy pants and the shirt that hangs over the railing beside him, which he has ostensibly taken off in order to soak up some of the sunlight, is also burgundy. Only belatedly does she notice the peculiar, familiar buzz at the back of her Cessipine that warns of a guardian's presence. "Yours?" asks Alabaster. Syenite licks her lips. "I was hoping he was yours." "No." And then Alabaster makes a show of stepping forward to rest his hands against the railing, bowing as if he means to lean on it and stretch his shoulders. "Don't let him touch you with his bare skin." So, there goes the first warning where I'm just like, wait, why not? What the fuck? And there's a description about how even though there isn't anything specific about guardians that makes them look like they're different from other people, you can still pick them out of a crowd. And that there just is something about them, a confidence or something that like sets them apart and you can tell who they are. So, she looks over at Alabaster and can see that he is standing in this way that suggests he is ready for a fight, and she does not understand this. And the Guardian says, "Would that you had done only the job you were told to do. Such a willful creature you are, Alabaster." Syenite scowls. Even here she is condescended to. "I did this job, Guardian. Is there some problem with my work?" The Guardian turns to look at her in surprise, and that's when Syenite realizes she's made a mistake. A big one, because his smile doesn't return. "Did you now?" Alabaster hisses, and evil earth, she feels it when he stabs his awareness into the strata, because it goes so unbelievably deep. The strength of him makes her whole body reverberate, not just her Cessipine. She can't follow it. He's past her range in the span of a breath, easily piercing to the magma, even though it's miles down. And his control of all that pure earth energy is perfect. Amazing. He could shift a mountain with this easily. But why? The Guardian smiles suddenly. Guardian Lachette sends her regards, Alabaster. While Syenite is still trying to parse this, and the fact that Alabaster is about to fight a Guardian, Alabaster stiffens all over. "You found her?" "Of course. We must talk of what you did to her. Soon." Suddenly, Syenite does not know when he drew it or where from. There is a black glass knife in his hand. Its blade is wide but ridiculously short, maybe only 2 inches in length, barely enough to be called a knife at all. And why is he drawing a weapon on 2 Imperial orogenes in the first place? "Guardian," she tries. "Maybe there's been some kind of The Guardian does something. Syenite blinks, but the tableau is as before. So, Alabaster jumps in front of Syenite, and Alabaster has been stabbed and is laying there screaming, but that kind of like scream that's silent because you're in so much pain that you can't quite let out a sound. And as he's laying there, this Guardian, who we find out is named Edke, has a new glass knife that's longer. So I'm assuming that the short one is meant to just disable and the long one is meant to kill. So he stabs, I believe what he's doing is stabbing Alabaster with the short one just to get him out of the way, but he wants to keep him alive. So she sees that this guardian is coming at her with this knife, and she reaches into the earth for power, but she can't reach it. There's nothing there, and it's described as that feeling of when you hit your elbow really hard and your hand goes numb. That's the feeling that she's getting trying to reach the power of the earth, is that there's just this sort of tingling numbness that she can tell something's happening, but there isn't any ability for her to like function with it. And as he comes toward her, there's this really interesting moment. As Edke walks toward her with the poignard ready, there is a tightness around his eyes, a grim set to his mouth, which makes her think of how she feels when she has a bad headache. This is what makes her blurt, "Are you, all right?" She has no idea why she asks this. At this, Edke cocks his head. The smile returns to his face, gentle and surprised. "How kind you are. I'm fine, little one. Just fine. Please, we haven't done anything wrong. I don't understand." "You need not understand," he says. "You need only do one thing." And then he lunges, aiming the poignard at her chest. Later, she will understand the sequence of events. Later, she will realize everything occurred in the span of a gasp. For now, however, it is slow. The passage of time becomes meaningless. She is aware only of the glass knife, huge and sharp, its facets gleaming in the fading dusk. It seems to come at her, gradually, gracefully, drawing out her duty-bound terror. This has never been right. So as she's realizing how this isn't right, all of this is fucked up, how this one instant is like a representation of everything that she has ever had to endure, writ small. She reaches out and pulls power from the broken obelisk. She screams because she has forgotten that the obelisk is broken. It hurts as she grinds across the zone of damage, each of the cracks seaming through her and shattering her and splitting her into pieces, until she stops, hovering, and curled in agony amid the cracked redness. It isn't real. It cannot be real. She feels herself also lying on sandy wooden boards with fading sunlight on her skin. She does not feel the guardian's glass knife, or at least not yet. But she is here too, and she sees, though Sesapine are not eyes, and the sight is all in her imagination. The stone eater at the core of the obelisk floats before her. "Are you all right?" she wonders, and she has no idea why she wonders it, even as she herself cracks apart. His flesh is so terribly fissured. She wants to hold her breath, lest she damage him further, but that is irrational, because she isn't here and this isn't real. She is on a street, about to die, but this stone eater has been dead for an age of the world. The stone eater closes his mouth and opens his eyes and lowers his head to look at her. "I'm fine," he says. "Thank you for asking." And then the obelisk shatters. What happened? And we find out later, like, I hesitate to even say what we find out later, because it's not really, again, there was obviously some sort of terrible explosion, because the next time that they see Alia, it's a pulsing, like, red spot on the horizon. But what exactly happened? Like, I know I'm not supposed to know. And frankly, that's only the one chapter, and I'm 40 minutes into this recording, so I need to move along. But I just need to register that I'm not entirely clear what happened there, and that I'm okay with that and moving on, because I trust that this is all going to be revealed. But it is a little frustrating, and I don't think being frustrated is necessarily a bad thing always, but it is an uncomfortable thing. Okay, so chapter 15, You're Among Friends. This is Esun's chapter, also known as our chapter. And they have reached the spot where all of the orogenes are, except this place does not seem like there are any people here. And not only that, but all of the buildings are, first of all, there's no wall to this community. There's nothing to sort of designate a beginning of territory even. And all of the buildings are built as if people took different pieces of like model towns that were designed with dramatically different styles and put them together. So there are like long, squat, stucco type buildings like from the Southwest mixed with tall, narrow, like city-like buildings. And just the look of it as being all like cobbled together gives the impression that this is not an organized place that can defend itself, which I found interesting. Tonki is walking through with blades in her hand because she is ready for a fight. She's got the black-bladed glass knives, which makes me go, I know that there are different types of glass knives, that this is like something that Alabaster specifically says later, that there are glass knives that the ones the Guardians used are treated somehow to give a different effect than a normal knife. But that did make me immediately go, is Tonki like an ex-Guardian? Is she somebody who's been exiled for some reason because she wouldn't do what they wanted her to do? I don't know. And Esun is walking through, like, noticing how there aren't many people here. And is asking Hoa, like, are you sure that this is the right place? And Tonki is like, yeah, I mean, it's obvious that people have been here up until whenever the season started. Like, these gardens were healthy up until a couple months ago. You're momentarily surprised to realize you've been on the road for 2 months. I am too. I didn't have any concept that amount of time had passed as a reader, but that's a fucking while. So finally, you come across 2 different women. Well, 3 if you count the other as a woman. There is one who is as pale as Hoa, but with like blonde hair and normal looking eyes. The one who draws your eye next is nearly her opposite and quite possibly the most intimidating woman you've ever seen. And she has these huge black eyes that she has outlined with eyeliner and like gray eyeshadow. And there's a momentary thought in Esun's mind of just like, wow, we're in the middle of like the apocalypse and this chick is still putting eye makeup on. And I'm not sure if that's ridiculous or badass as hell. And she is a Raga and knows that you are a Raga. And there is this like instant connection. Her name is Ika. Ika Raga Castrima. Welcome. And you are? You blurt, Raga? You use this word all the time, but hearing it like this as a use name emphasizes its vulgarity. Naming yourself Raga is like naming yourself pile of shit. It's a slap in the face. It's a statement of what you can't tell. That, isn't one of the 7 common use names, said Tonki. Her voice is wry. You think she's trying to make a joke to cover nerves. Or even one of the 5 lesser accepted ones. Let's call this one new. Ika's gaze flickers over each of your companions, assessing, then back to you. So your friends know what you are. And this is the first time that Esun really realizes that, yeah, Tonki totally has known what I am this whole time. Like, I kind of thought she might, but yeah, she definitely does. So this is a new community. And let's see. Oh, here it is. She pauses then, gazing at Hoa, and for a moment her expression tightens. You look at Hoa, too, puzzled because granted he's strange-looking, but you're not sure what he's done to merit that kind of tension. That's when you finally notice that Hoa has gone utterly still, and his little face has sharpened from its usual cheerfulness into something taut and angry and almost feral. He's glaring at Ika like he wants to kill her. No, not Ika. You follow his gaze to the third member of Ika's party, who's stayed slightly behind the other two till now, and whom you haven't really paid attention to because Ika's so eye-catching. A tall, slender woman. And then you stop, frowning, because all at once you're not sure about that designation. The female part, sure. Her hair is Antarctic lank and deep red in color, decoratively long, framing features that are finely lined. It's clear she means to be read as a woman, though she's only wearing a long, loose, sleeveless gown that should be far too thin for the cooling air. But her skin. You're staring. It's rude. Not the best way to start things off with these people, but you can't help it. Her skin. It's not just smooth, it's glossy, sort of, almost polished. She's either got the most amazing complexion you've ever seen, or that isn't skin. So she smiles, and Hoa smiles, and then you finally realize that they are not fucking smiling. They are like hissing and grimacing at each other. And their teeth are faceted like diamonds, which is really cool sounding. And that is what really reveals them to be different than what they are, like than what they appear. So Ika tells her companion to calm the fuck down. And her companion says it can be done without harm to you or your companions. I don't want anything done. This is my place and you agreed to abide by my rules. Back off. The blonde woman shifts a little. She doesn't bring the crossbow up, but you think she's ready to do so at a moment's notice, for whatever good that will do. The red-haired woman doesn't move for a moment, and then she closes her mouth to hide those awful diamond teeth. As she does this, you realize several things at once. The first is that she wasn't actually smiling. It was a threat display. The second is that with her mouth closed and that placid expression, she looks far less unnerving. So yeah, and there's also the realization that, like, Hoa knows that his teeth will give him away, and that's part of why he never ate in front of you. So, finally, Asun asks, are you, like, have you seen a man pass through here with a little girl that looked like me? And they say no, and Asun basically collapses and loses her mind, starts to cry. Cry isn't even the word, is keening and screaming and sobbing. And she feels this, build of power, and then something sweeps through her. And I feel like Ika is the one who sort of grounded out the power that was rising in Asun from her despair. Orogenes, certainly, but deployed in a way you've never experienced before. Hey, she says. There's nothing like compassion on her face. Still, her voice is softer as she speaks to you. Hey, you okay now? No, you say. No. But I can keep it together. See that you do. Beyond her, the blonde woman looks skeptical about the possibility of this. Ika says, you can stay or you can go. If you decide to stay, I'll take you into the calm. But you need to know up front, Kostrima is something unique. We're trying something very different here. If this season turns out to be short, then we're going to be up a lava lake when the Sansa comes down on us. But I don't think this season will be short. And this is the part where Asun says some shit that's really pretty, terrifying. This season won't be short. It will last decades. Ika lifts an eyebrow. Yeah, she's right. You're trying to be gentle for the sake of your companions, and they don't need gentleness. They need the truth. Centuries. Even that's an understatement. You're pretty sure this one will last at least 1,000 years. Maybe a few thousand. Tonki frowns a little. Well, everything does point to either a major epirogenic deformation or possibly just a simple disruption of isostasy through the entire plate network. But the amount of orogenesis needed to overcome that much inertia is prohibitive. Which I'm just like, oh, God. That's, centuries. Good God. I don't even, is that the end of the human race? I mean, it must be, right? Oh, yeah, right. Because right after that, Essen thinks to herself, a much quicker and more merciful an end for the human race. So, yeah, unless something else takes their place. Oh, man, I just wasn't expecting it to be that bad. Never in a million years. So, they agree to stay and to not fight and to be cool with each other, except for Hoa, who starts to say, "You don't command me." And Ika says to him, "Let me put it to you this way. You can keep doing what you've obviously been doing, trying to be as avalanche subtle as your kind ever gets, or I can start telling everyone what all of you are really up to." Which, what does that mean? But he kind of looks over at the other stone person, and she, gives him, a half smile, kind of yeah, I know. They totally know. And he's like, fine, all right. So we've taken in a few people. No men traveling with girls, I don't think, but other travelers looking for a place, including some from Sebek Cortent. We adopted them if we thought they were useful. It's what any smart comm does at times like these, kicking out the undesirable, taking in those with valuable skills and attributes. And you're thinking, you being a Soon, are thinking about what your kids can do as orogenes. One is a stone napper. Useful, but napping's not exactly a rare skill, which I really want to know what that even means, because it sounds like stealing, kidnapping, but I don't think that's what it's meant to be. I think napping is some sort of, a craft. And Asun, is like you and Ika, and for some reason the people of this comm seem to want orogenes around. Come on in and I'll show you a marvel or three, as if she hasn't already done so. But you move to follow her, because neither myths nor mysteries can hold a candle to the most infinitesimal spark of hope. And that's the end of that chapter. So then we'll go into Cyan in the Hidden Land. So Cyan wakes up, and I thought that she was going to wake up in a wasteland, that she will have fucked this place up. It turns out that she did fuck it up, but in a much more enormous and permanent way, to the point where she could not have woken there because it is on fire and she would be dead. And when she finally sits up and is looking around, she notices that the stone that she's laying on, it's all different. There is a different view when she looks up. The ocean is practically surrounding them. And that Alabaster is nearby. And even though he is curled up on himself, he is not dead. And the blade does not appear to still be sticking out of him. Beyond him at the top of the slope stands a tall, slender figure clad in a white flowing robe. A figure, a woman, does not turn. She's looking away at something over the rise that Syenite cannot see. And it turns out that they're on an island, which makes Syenite really panic because islands are susceptible to being wiped out in tsunamis. And this woman who... later on, Alabaster calls her Antimony because she doesn't actually have a name. This woman says that she brought Syenite and Alabaster here to save their lives, and keep them safe. And I don't know, because she's obviously a stone woman, I don't know if she knows about the one that was stuck in the rock there. If she, I don't know. She points at the horizon. At the midpoint of this line is a pimple, fat and red glowing and smoky. Alia, says the Stone Eater. There's a village on the island, it turns out. It turns out that the people who live there are pirates. They have to be, because there's no way to grow anything on this island. It doesn't have any topsoil. It's just not possible to plant things. They can't really raise animals because there are no plants. So the people who live here are fishermen and pirates, and they like basically attack Alia and then charge them money to keep from attacking. Alabaster knows the stone woman. He is familiar with her. And when he says that he calls her antimony, he says, well, Alabaster was taken. And also she's not a raga. So, so he names her something that's like mixed with metal. And when she says, why did she bring us here? He says, there's no why to anything they do. Or if there is, they never bother telling us. I've stopped asking, frankly, waste of breath. Antimony has been coming to me for the past 5 years, usually when no one else is around. I used to think I was hallucinating her. She says she's here for me. I can't decide whether it's a supportive statement or, something more sinister. Does it matter, though, if she saved our lives? And it turns out that stone people can like walk through stone as if it's air, which is a really weird image that I'm super curious about. And that is probably how she saved the two of them, is by dragging them through the stone. So she tells him that the Stone Eater that was trapped inside that obelisk is not dead. And he's really startled by this. Like, really, obviously she's caught him off guard. And it seems like he knows so much more than her that catching him off guard with anything is it's not your average reaction. And he says, well, maybe it was a hallucination because you just tapped into so much more power than you should ever have been able to handle by going in with that obelisk. And she sort of nods and says that she realizes that if that obelisk had not been broken, the power in it probably would have killed her. Which, that's pretty intense, And I'm wondering, like, because I had sort of been depending on the idea that the obelisks were something that all of the orogenes could use to tap into a different level of power and manage to overcome everyone else and break free. But if tapping it kills you, that's not really going to be super worth it. Someone or many someones knew about that broken obelisk in Alia's harbor. Whoever that was, they also knew that a 10-ringer would likely notice the thing the instant he started sessing around down there. And since all it took to reactivate it was a 4-ringer sessing around, it stands to reason that these mysterious someones had no idea just how sensitive or how dangerous the obelisk really was. Or neither you nor I would have made it to Alia alive. So that's interesting. So there's a possibility that maybe he was poisoned in order to keep him out of the way so that she would have been the only one that went down there and she wouldn't have had the power to sense it at all. That maybe it wasn't that maybe it wasn't that he had insulted the person when they first arrived there and he is poisoned because of that, but it was like a much longer game. Guardians don't like to discipline us where the stills can see if they can avoid it. It might earn us inappropriate public sympathy. That broad daylight attack was a last resort. We're lucky he didn't try to poison you instead. Even for me, it should have worked. Paralysis of any kind tends to affect the Cessipine. I would have been completely helpless if he hadn't been able to summon power from the amethyst obelisk, harnessing Syenite's Cessipine to do what his could not. Now that Syen better understands what he did that night, it's somehow worse. She cocks her head at him. No one really knows what you're capable of, do they? Alabaster sighs a little, looking away. I don't even know what I'm capable of, Syen. So this is a really interesting little twist happening here. And I don't know what to think of it. But yeah, it ends with them going to meet some of the people on the island and her finding out that they have been here for ages. and that rather than being afraid of their orogenes, they put theirs in charge of things. And we also find out here that Alabaster is gay, and that's part of him, like, not being into having sex with her or other women. And just how awful it must be for him to have to, like, endure this. And that a guardian killed his lover in front of him. And yeah, it's just like this moment that he describes. He says that he held Hess and grinned while it happened, like it was the most beautiful thing in the world, the sick fuck. What does the guardian's skin do? It turns your orogeny inward, I guess. I don't know a better way to explain it. But everything inside us that can move, apart from plates and seal faults and so on, all that power we're born with, those guardians turn it back on us. So, this is another, orogeny doesn't work on flesh, not directly. If it did, he falls silent. Syenite does not prompt him to go on this time. Which I'm really curious, like, does that mean, like, what does he burn up? Does he turn into stone? Does he explode? Like, I can't imagine. What does that mean? So yeah, God, there's so much happening here, guys, and this crew, this, like, secret community here that has orogenes in charge, that's sort of left to themselves. I don't know. But I better go because I have another one coming up. So that wraps it. Thank you very much, Ashlyn, for commissioning this book. It's fascinating. I am gripped by it. I can't wait to cover another episode. And thank you to all of you for listening. And I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.